Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back to yet another episode. And today I want to talk about a cheap setup that I use for photography professionally and for paid work. This is important because everything we're seeing out there is expensive. We are chasing newer specs, autofocus, performance, speed, and a lot of the time, these are things that we don't really need. We are failing to ask ourselves the question when we purchase gear, what is it that we need? Not necessarily what is future-proof, not necessarily what is relevant in 2022, 2023, or 2024. This is important because when I started in photography, a lot of things that I bought I don't use today and have since sold. The same as when I got into video. A lot of things that I thought I needed, I end up selling. The more you do and the more you get into a space, you realize what it is that you need and what you don't. And what I found is that 8-year-old flagship cameras, lenses, that still works, and optical quality hasn't improved that much in the last 10 years. So getting a flagship that is 8 years old and a lens to accompany that is a big win. My setup is the 56 f1.2, the older version, including the Fujifilm XH1. This is what I use for stills. Does it perform really well in terms of video? Probably not. But there are other alternatives out there that are just as cheap. The setup cost me under $1,000 US. I'm using it almost every weekend for professional paid work. So if you're starting out, don't just fall into the trap of buying what you think you'll need. Don't spend money today that you don't have for features that you might need tomorrow. That is actually not future proofing, that is waste of money. What you would rather do instead is, if you think there are certain features that you would need in a particular camera or ecosystem, rent it out. 10 years ago, it was very difficult to rent out high-end cinema cameras and flagship cameras because they were just expensive. The cameras that existed back then were even expensive for rental. Since then, we've had more affordable cinema lens cameras and professional high-end cameras for stills. You can rent the R3, you can rent the R5C, you can rent the C300 for a very affordable price. So if you think there are certain features that you need, rather rent out the gear. And if you get to a point where you're renting this gear frequently, then you want to look at buying it. That is how I've made all my purchases. A lot of the gear I own today, I started by renting it out until it got to a point where I realized that I was renting it out way too frequently, that it just made sense to purchase it. I have no regrets because everything that is in my camera bag, everything that you see in this room, I use almost every week. The setup is obviously not the best for video, but you can still use it for video if that's what you want. I use it for stills and it works perfectly. I use the X-T3 with the Tamron 17-70 f2.8 for video because it works perfectly. Do they work for all scenarios? No, but I don't shoot all scenarios. I work on the basis of what I shoot the most, and that's the gear I purchase. Everything else that is infrequent or subject to unique needs from a client, I rent out. And that is what I would encourage every single person trying to make a purchase to do. Whether you're in the Canon ecosystem, Nikon, Sony, there are older cameras and older lenses that will give you really good quality and for a fraction of what is available today. This is important, and I wish I had learned this because I made a lot of bad purchases when I started out. So back to my setup. I'm not going to talk about the specs. I've made a couple of videos, check them out. The links are in the description, as well as this lens. But the combination is extremely valuable, and this works whether you're in any other ecosystem. Get a flagship that is older, or get a camera that will give you what you need. Now, what I need from the XH1 is dual SIM, a battery grip. I need good IBIS, which is fairly decent to be honest, and I need something that works to how I shoot. And just to let you in, even people who are shooting with the latest cameras like the XH2, XH2S, or XT5, when they can't afford to miss a shot, they tend to shoot either single point or even manual. This camera allows you to do that as well, and it does that very well. Moving on to my lens, this is a 56 f1.2 with a wide aperture. It is not necessarily fast in terms of autofocus, but for what I need it for, it works really well. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that are sort of regarded as professional features such as weather sealing, but I don't shoot in those conditions. I've never at any point felt like my gear was at risk of damage because those are just not the scenarios I shoot in. So I got this purchase pretty much used, XH1 and the 56, for about $950. I've gotten countless good quality images from this. Paid work, I've never had any of my clients complain, and I continue to trust it. And as long as it's relevant to my needs, I will continue to use it. And that is the mindset you should have when you are investing in gear. Everything we are seeing on social media, on YouTube, is paid promotions. People are advertising gear that they don't even use. People are advertising gear that they wouldn't buy. And sometimes they even fail to mention that the gear is borrowed and they're sending it back after they're doing their reviews. This is not the real world application. And that's why I tend to also encourage people who are beginning to focus on videos from creators who are shooting exactly what it is that you want to be shooting. Don't watch landscape videos and focus on that gear when you want to shoot events. Focus on what it is that you need out of gear for events and start making your purchases in that direction. I know this is not really a fun video to make. I know you're not getting a lot of value or high-end editing, but it is important information because we're living in a consumer-driven environment that is toxic to the craft of photography, filmmaking, or just being a creative in general. Make wiser decisions, and if I can advise you on one thing, look at cameras that are 10 years old, 8 years old. You'll get a lot of value and you'll still make beautiful images. That is it for me, guys. Until next time.